Good morning, everybody. Good morning. How are you? My name is Phil, DJ Right Click Valentine, DJ because of my excellent taste in music, Right Click because of my Appalachian Trail Through hiking name, and Valentine. That's my last name. It's an English surname. There's a Valentine gravestone next to a church in Eccles. Did I say that right? Or Eccles? Eccles? Eccles from like 1350 or something like that. My dad, and I actually saw it when I was in England one time. And I don't know why I went down that rabbit trail, but I did. So I'm also been in recovery since December 28th, 1987. And that puts me in my 37th year of recovery. Oh boy, we got Joyce here. I see Joyce, the comedian. Michelle thinks she's a comedian too, and I'm pretty sure Melissa might too. Cindy, she's not a comedian, but she does come from Iowa. She's all business, that woman. Watch out for her. And we got folks from all across the globe bringing you the constant variety in sports. Oh, never mind. Um, Wide world of sports. You guys don't know that with the skier going down and tumbling off the end and. Never mind. Anyway, so I've been in recovery for 36, 37 years. Um, Kathy, I'm coming up on 37 years too. We're like sisters, brother and sister, I mean. You're like my sister in recovery. I've been executive director or working at CCAR for the past 25 plus years, trained a lot of recovery coaches. Love doing these conversations about recovery coach performance support. Love doing the Advanced Academy for Recovery Coaches. The conversations we have in that is absolutely extraordinary, and they usually carry over into this meeting as well. Laura, are you being artful today? You are? Good. Good.
I am. Thank you. Always.
Aren't you in like Georgia?
I am.
Is it dark there or what's
It
going on?
is. We're
Why
having
is
a thunderstorm and a tornado warning.
it?
But this is our spring break from college, so here I am.
All right. It looks like it's the middle of the night and it's like you got a thunderstorm. That's a good old Georgia thunderstorm for sure. Good to see you. Um, Quick update about my health. Some of you are curious, I know. Some of you probably aren't. But I'm in my third cycle of chemotherapy for diffuse, aggressive B-cell, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I've lost my very gorgeous, goatee that I was very fond of. And as you can see, if you look closely, you can put it on speaker view that I now definitely have a face for radio. It's true that this is a face now that's just prime for radio. But you guys get to look at me too, but you don't have to. So the treatment's going well. Next week's a big week. I have my fourth cycle and I'd have another PET scan to see how well the treatment's been going. But you know what? My dear friend Art Woodard always said that I'd ask him, "How you doing, brother?" And he'd say, "I am well enough." And I am well enough to be here with you and encouraged and inspired with all your smiling faces. So let's get on with it. So I want to have a few brave souls today introduce themselves, where your name, where you're from, and tell me a story about a fence. A fence. Michael, it's not a fence where you go sell all your stolen property, Michael. And that's not the kind of fence I'm talking about, dude. Because I know you know a lot of fences. Probably still. No, no, you don't. No, you don't, not anymore. All right. So anyway, my fence story is I remember, I think we were playing that, I was born in 59. So these games were in the 60s, early 70s, these vicious games where we would roam the neighborhood at night and ring somebody's doorbell and then take off. You know, the games we used to play. And so we rang this doorbell and the guy opened it way too quickly. So we took off and I ran around the back and I ran and I saw this hill coming down and it was pretty dark. Ran full speed and I hit a bar, like a wire fence at thigh level. And I hit it and I went flying, like somersaulting through the air, landed on my face down the hill, big bruise across my thigh. And so that was an invisible fence I had just run into, didn't see it, full speed, you know, back when I was fast. Barry remembers when he was young and fast too, right, Barry?
I'm
Yeah,
still young
so,
and fast. Still young and
yep,
fast.
I know, right? So anybody got a fence story and want to introduce themselves and tell me a fence story? It doesn't have to be anything you crash into. It's just a story about a fence.
Hey, everybody. My name is Donna Bruce from Baltimore. And when you were telling that story, I was like, Tag, I do have a fence story. So we had the swing set with the pole, the metal poles. It was probably
Mhm.
4 poles.
Yep.
And one person would stand on our legs and you would push the person higher and higher and higher. And they jumped off and it was like I had to jump off and I slid literally under the wire of the fence. Oh man,
Yeah.
it was horrible. My legs were all bruised up. I was a kid. It was fun though. But I got talked about all summer how I ended up underneath of this fence. So yeah, that's my fence story.
Yeah, it was always cool when you're on those swing sets to see if you could get the legs to lift up, right? We're crazy kids. Kurt,
Hi, everybody. Kurt calling in from Holland.
I don't know why we can't hear you. You're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
How's this? Nothing?
Nope, not a sound. Technical difficulty. We'll come back to you. Georgia.
Hi, sorry I've had my camera off. I've been eating my lunch very late.
That's okay.
I'm Georgia from the UK, recovery coach professional. And my fence story, when you said about fence stories, it took me straight back to when I was just getting sober.
Mhm.
I was outside and I literally painted and repainted and carried on painting just to keep my mind busy, down listening to podcast after podcast after podcast about recovery topics and just doing something and feeling like I've achieved something every day, just being able to like have that time of being mindful what I was doing, but also not thinking too much about having time.
Wow, cool. Thank you, Georgia. Cindy.
Hi.
Hello, Cindy.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Cindy West from Des Moines, Iowa. When we were kids, I have two older brothers, and when we were kids, we used to jump off the roof, and we would try to jump and hurdle the fence. And I did whatever my brothers told me. So we were running and we jumped over the fence, and my oldest brother went first this one time, and the neighbor got mad and started chasing him down because he jumped over into their yard. He tried to climb the fence back over and he got hung up on his arm by the fence, and he ended up having like 20 stitches in his arm. And I didn't get in trouble, but he got in trouble by my parents, which was pretty funny.
Wow. Girls always get away with everything. Ed.
Morning, everyone. My name is Ed, and I am coming to you live from Weehawken, New Jersey.
Mhm.
I always come immediately to my thought when I hear fence, and that is I was 6 years old on the farm in the Midwest, and it was winter. One of the favorite things we used to do in the winter was walk down to our pond, and we had an ice skating rink on our pond in the winter. It was snowing, a lot of snow. We were always following the fence line to walk down to the pond. It was a barbed wire fence.
Mhm.
I don't know why we used to have this game we would play. One would have to close their eyes, and then the one in front of the person would lead that person, and you had to follow their voice. Well, I'm walking with my eyes closed, following the voice, And I was walking in, and there was a large snowbank. As I walked into that snowbank, my foot got caught, and I went forward, and I fell into the snowbank. On my way down, I also caught my cheek on the barbed wire fence.
Oh,
And it wasn't a big scratch, but it was bloody. And the first thing I saw was the blood on the snow, and I freaked out. So, needless to say, our trip down to the pond was cut short because I just couldn't walk in the snow properly.
mm-hmm. All right, cool. Thank you. LC.
Hey everybody, I am Elsie Demers and I'm from New York, and that's where I'm sitting right now. So I have a great fence story. We used to go pool hopping blown out of our socks, and it was a common thing we did. And we had a friend who had a broken leg, and we were pushing him in a wheelbarrow while we were going pool hopping. And we went into these people's yard, and we were proceeding to go in their pool thinking they weren't home, but they were, and they let out their 2 Doberman pinchers. So we were running with the guy in the wheelbarrow, and we realized we were fenced in. So we catapulted this guy with a broken leg from the wheelbarrow, from the top of the rail, and catapulted him on the other side, left the wheelbarrow, and ran for our lives so the cops didn't come and get us. So that was my fence story.
All right.
And hoping that Pete's doing well with his injuries.
Wow, thank you, LC. Robin, good to see you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Robin Horston Spencer from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but my fence story happened in Ohio, where I was born and raised. I was doing some canvassing, going to people's houses, canvassing. I think I was actually doing census. And I went up to the house, and I remember going through the small little fence. You know, they had one of those little short ones, short enough, I guess, for a dog. Now I know. But I go up to the door, and this little rat-tat-tat came after me. And it was so ferocious. You know, those little dogs are very mean and ferocious, for real. They don't know you. And it just came, and I love dogs, and I tried it. That dog told me
That dog tore and she gone. I know what happened to Robin. Kurt, let's try you again.
Hello.
Yes, there we go.
All right. Kurt, calling in from Holland. My story is a crash, actually. And the fence is really only a small part of it. I had a side job as a taxi driver, and I was driving a small bus. And I have to calculate from metric to imperial now, so that's difficult. I was driving about 80 miles an hour, and there was a car on the highway driving about 30 miles an hour. So that's a huge speed difference, and I didn't see him coming in time. I managed to evade while I was braking, but in doing so, it was too rigorous, and I started swerving, went off the road into the ditch, tumbled once with the bus, and went through a fence, and it came to a stop. And actually, I wasn't even wearing my belt, because as a taxi driver in Holland, when you have passengers, you're not required to have your belt because they're able to use the belt to strangle you.
Okay.
But I had different concerns at that moment. And actually, I just climbed out, and I was fine. I didn't even have a concussion, nothing.
Wow. Okay. Barry, how are you, sir?
And wonderful. Good morning. So I'm Barry, recovery coach, C-Car Hartford. I got a barbed wire story, man. I grew up in North Carolina, and there used to be a stream inside of the cow pasture, right? And we used to always go over there and play in the stream, but we used to always have these bright ideas. We'd throw rocks and chase the cows. Well, evidently, either it was a bull or one of them cows didn't take too kindly to it, and he started chasing us. And we ran, and we knew the barbed wire, but where, you know, it used to be vines on the barbed wire, so you couldn't always see it. And I remember my whole jean leg getting caught in the barbed wire, and I'm just running. I ripped the whole jean leg, had cuts on my legs, and that was one of the ones I always remember. So we stopped playing over there as much after that.
Thanks, Barry. You're back, Robin.
I
We got
am.
you.
My
I
computer
think
didn't tell me. What'd you
think
say, Phil?
your internet connection is not too good. We'll skip you and move on, okay? You're still coming in and out.
Okay.
Frank.
Okay.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Garris. I'm coming to you from the rainy city of West Orange, New Jersey. Fence story. So I played semi-pro football. So I get the kickoff and I'm doing the whole Forrest Gump thing. And I'm like, I'm getting ready to score. I'm getting ready to score. I never saw these two guys coming from my right side and boom, right into the fence. Thankfully, I didn't get a concussion, but you know, they got me pretty good. I thought I was going to score. They got me on maybe the 10-yard line, and all I was looking at was the end zone. They were looking at me. So that's my fence story.
Remember that fence. Thanks, Kai.
Hey everyone, my name is Kai Fox, recovery coach here in London, Ontario, Canada. My fence story. So when we came from Bermuda to Canada, we had a little house in Cambridge, and I had the most awesome Ninja Turtle collection. And I would so proud of my Ninja Turtle collection that I would, you know, throw it into the air for the world to see. And I would throw harder and harder and harder. And then at a certain point, I threw it so hard it fell into my neighbor's pool next door. And so I thought, okay, those turtles are gone now. You know, I've got to come to terms. You know, I'm going through all the stages of mourning, and then you know, about a week later, I see my Ninja Turtle in the mailbox. And so, you know, that was kind of cool. I didn't understand how it could have happened. I thought it was all gone. So, um, I kept throwing them, and then it happened again. And so it shifted from doing it by accident to doing it on purpose, because I thought it was cool that they went on their little journey and came back home.
That's funny. Thank you. Laura.
It's Laura. I'm in Brunswick, Georgia. And my fence story is really quick. It was at when I lived in Athens, Georgia, going to UGA, so early 90s. And you know, the some of the clothing, I won't call it fashion at the time, were cut off jean shorts and whatnot. This is, you know, height of Madonna time here. And so a friend and I walked down to the pool at our apartment complex, and it was well into the morning, probably 2 or 3 in the morning. And we decided that we wanted to go swimming. And so we proceeded to climb the little short, 4 feet high or so, chain link fence. She got over okay. But on my way over, I'd taken off my shoes. My toes got tangled in the wire right at the top, and I ended up falling and cutting a bit, not in my skin, but in my shorts, cutting a big, gigantic gash in my shorts, and ended up just leaving them there because I was not able to get untangled from them.
Gotcha. Michelle, how are you?
Well, I'm just fine. Phil, nice to see that you feel well enough to be here.
Yep.
So that makes me happy. So my fence story is when I was still in active addiction. By the way, I'm from Rhode Island, but right now I'm in the lovely city of Bridgeport, Connecticut. I was, I don't know, maybe 20 something. And I had been at this club called Timothy's 2, which everyone went to. And when the night was over, I got in my car and I ran out of gas somewhere on a back road and walked to find this chain link fence. And like Laura, climbed up the fence and got caught on it. And I could not get out of it. And so I remember yanking on it, having the chain link fence top cut the whole outfit I had on, which I was really upset about because I had just bought it, and scratched my leg. And so I had to leave them there. And I had no idea where I was. I walked, I don't know where, until I found a phone booth, and then used the phone booth at 3 a.m. to try and call people to help me out. Unfortunately, no one answered their phone, and I don't remember how I got where I lived. So to this day, that is a
Wow.
fault. Yeah. Thank God I don't have to do that anymore.
Thank you. Last chance, anybody else? Ryan, you got a fence story for us.
Yeah, as a kid, I used to take shortcuts from school, and I go around the backyards to get over to a certain street. And one time I went over the fence and there was two German Shepherds in there. And I jumped right in the pen with them. And every time I would try to run towards the fence to climb it to get out, the dog would run and bite me.
Ouch.
Yep.
Okay. Tina.
Hello. Good to see you as well, Mr. Phil. It's been a while, been real busy. However, I didn't want to really tell my story, but I said I better tell it because my fence story almost would have been a fence, I believe, if I didn't know how to jump the fence as quick as I did. Behind our house, we had a fence, and the school was right behind the house. And our fence was about 6 feet tall. And I would jump over the fence because my brother and all of us, we knew how to jump over the fence, not climb the fence, but jump over the fence. And because that was a skill set, that actually helped me get free from something that came after me that wasn't meant to be. So I had went to the playground where the school was. And I remember I must have been about 6 or 7 years old, and I saw someone going down the street. It was where I lived at in Michigan. And it was two men in a car, and he said, "Come here, little girl, come here, little girl." And because I was so skilled at jumping that fence, I ran through the back of the school, and I jumped that fence. And I just remember that if I didn't have that skill set, I might not have been here. So that fence could have been a fence that could have happened if I didn't know how to jump the fence. So that was a victory fence for me and my skill set, because I to this day, if I ever had a trauma, that one I do remember indirectly, because I had to make that fence and it had the stickers at the top of it. So I didn't want to really share, but I remember that so vividly because I know a lot of people may not have been able to make that fence jump like that. And I just soared right over it. And I was just like 7, but I just was thankful that God covered me.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay. So here's a question anybody can answer. Raise your virtual hand if you can answer the question. What's the purpose of a fence? Khalees.
The purpose of you were asking about fence stories. I mean, I grew up with like laid and barbed wire fences and stuff, but I couldn't think about a prominent one. But the goal of a fence would be to keep either things out or things in.
Keep things out, keep things in. Good. I like
One or
that.
the other.
Laura?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I was going to say. It's,
Okay.
I know that there's, a fence needs to be somewhat porous, but not too porous. There's like a Goldilocks phase of a fence when it's just right. So it's not letting too much out and it's not letting too much in.
Okay, thank you. Kurt, what's the purpose of a fence?
I was thinking so that is a literal and physical boundary.
Yep, boundary, thank you. Wanda?
I was gonna say the same thing that like we always put fences up to create a line in which we were not to cross and our neighbors were not to cross. And so like this was a definitive line that showed that this is my side, this is your side, and
Right.
to keep us separate.
Right, a boundary marker, a boundary definition, like it. Thank you. Barry?
And I said to mark territory.
Your territory?
Yeah, to mark territory.
Gotcha. Gilvette?
Yeah, I had to manage boundaries.
Manage boundaries.
Manage a boundary.
Love it. Neetha?
Privacy, security, safety, in, out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Protect ourselves.
Connect ourselves.
Protect.
Oh, protect ourselves. Gotcha. Kai?
Make the house look pretty.
Make the house look pretty. I like that. Yep. Frank?
A fence is used to divide,
To divide. Okay. So this topic is, and we're touching on it, is boundaries, right? And so how do you define a boundary? You know, that people always talk about that. You got to keep your boundaries. What is a boundary? How do you define it? Khalees?
It's funny you said that because I was just talking about this the other day. A boundary is focused on us and what our needs are, our limits, so that we can feel comfortable to live in society. Like, what do we need? So that might be anything really to operate.
Okay, thank you. Anne Marie?
Can you repeat that question? Because I had
Define boundary.
oh,
It's a
define
simple
boundary.
thing.
Yeah. So it is what you need at the time in the moment to place expectations in a relationship.
Okay, thank you. Kai?
I would say it's a set of values and expectations that, if are crossed, have a impact or a response.
Positive or negative impact?
Both.
Okay.
I would say negative, but yeah. They can.
Gotcha. Grayson?
I would say it is a barrier that we set, whether
Barrier.
it's physical or emotional, and say, here's the line.
I like that. So you equate a boundary with a barrier. Got it. Love it. Wanda? You're muted.
I equate my boundaries according to things that I've identified that are no longer negotiable in my life. And like, so I have non-negotiables that like I am not going to allow people to cross them, or I'm not going to cross them. So it goes both ways. So that's my boundary for myself and my boundary for others. And a boundary is not fluid unless you voice it to somebody and explain it to them. And so a boundary keeps me safe and it keeps me out of trouble.
Gotcha. Thank you. Georgia?
Hi, I was talking about this in my group a couple of days ago. So for me, I think a boundary is something that you discover when you start realizing what your emotional needs are, and then you can figure out from there what it is that you need, but you need to know how to communicate that to people. I also think it's really important that sometimes you can be a bit fluid with your boundaries. as long as it is communicated effectively. Sometimes there has to be a bit of sway, because otherwise we can be so hard on ourselves if we are not sticking so rigidly to our boundaries. I think it's important to have a bit of sway sometimes with that.
Thank you. Tina?
Boundaries draw the line emotionally, physically, and also financial boundaries. So it draws the line. It gives me some type of discipline and structure.
All right, thank you. Ed?
Oh gosh, Dr. Tina mentioned all three of mine, but I would also add that the boundaries are not permanent, that they will change as we change and as the situations change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Who would like to say, give me like concrete examples of a personal boundary? What are some concrete examples? Like you guys kind of defined it and said some things. What's a concrete, maybe concrete's not the right word. Is your boundary concrete? What is an example of a boundary that you have? Personal. Michael?
I close the door when I use the bathroom.
What the? I'm glad you do that. Okay. Thank you, Michael. Cindy?
Mine's not that exciting, but I would say turning off or not checking work email after a certain time of day.
Do you do that?
Most of the time.
Okay, most of the time.
Still working on the boundary.
Gotcha. Khalees?
I was gonna say too, well, like I do date nights with my son every Saturday, and so no matter what, I tell people that like I'm blocked out. This is my boundary. I'm not gonna be working or responding. I guess another one is like what I choose to disclose with people.
Well, those aren't very, so that's not a concrete boundary. That's not like a boundary.
Why?
Well, you didn't give me an example of what you won't disclose or not disclose. It was just some things you will,
Well,
some
there's
things you
things, I
won't.
mean, like would we share our whole life story with our recoveries? We share what's needed.
So how does that tie into boundaries?
Well, because if somebody's not managing their stuff and it's spilling all over the place, that's not going to be very healthy, is it?
So what's the boundary?
Managing your stuff.
Well, that's again, a generic one. And the other one you talked about was like the time, right? So sometimes you're talking about time and a scheduling thing. So you put a fence around a block of time. But okay, think about it. Brian, what's a boundary you have?
Not giving my recoveries money.
Ever?
No, ever. No.
Is it no, ever? You would never give a recovery money that you never have?
No, I wouldn't.
Huh? Okay. Gotcha. Kai?
My phone is on silent after 10 o'clock. So if you need to call me and it's an emergency, I will answer. However, if it's not an emergency, you can wait for tomorrow.
So that's a boundary, like time related, like kind of like Khalees said, this is my time with my child. This is a time for me. Time related, 10 o'clock. Gotcha. Georgia?
This also came up for me really recently, not putting myself in a situation where my recovery is at risk.
So how's that a boundary?
Because I will not turn up to I won't go to those places where I see myself at risk.
Where you see yourself at risk. So like, and this, I don't know this. So like if the recovery wanted to meet you in a bar, you might not go there.
No, so I was asked to go and be part of something recently, and it involved some training around alcohol, and I was like, that is my boundary. I am not going to be put in a situation where there is any alcohol training or any alcohol in that kind of environment. It's not that
Gotcha.
boundary. I'm not going.
Okay, good. Thank you. Kurt?
What Kai said reminded me, actually, there was boundary is a reason that I decided to have an old school landline so that I can actually switch my mobile phone off if I want to, and only the select few people who have the landline number can reach me.
Ah, thank you. Kevin, good to see you.
What's up, Phil? You're looking fabulous, man. You're looking fabulous, man.
You lie.
No, I don't. That's one of my boundaries, not to lie. No, mine's is to, this is once I got into recovery. So one of my things to never ever do is drink and drive. That is a boundary. I would never drink and drive. So that's mine.
Gotcha. Thank you. So, any other thoughts about a personal boundary? Tina?
A lot of times when you do dual services, people bring you into their crisis. And my boundary is to, when I'm working with people in recovery, not to allow them to bring me into their crisis. And that means that they can just walk over and just do what they want to do when it comes to toxicity. And I found that oftentimes that, I used to not give myself that space, but I don't let people come into that space and bring me into that crisis.
Gotcha. Thank you. Celine?
I would say my bubble, my space, my bubble.
That's your
My
boundary.
area. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. The physical space. Elsie?
So my personal boundary is to not take anything that is not mine. Like, it's very black and white. If something's not mine, I don't take it. And another personal boundary I have is if there's any special feelings between me and a recovery on either end, I immediately acknowledge that as an absolute boundary that is not negotiable.
That comes from the Recovery Coach Academy, those special feelings, right? Thank you. Brandy?
Good morning, everyone. My personal boundary is no is a complete sentence, and it's okay for me to say no. And that is part of my self-care, making sure that I am taking care of myself so that I'm able to take, to help support others. And so there are times where I have to say no, just to protect my own self.
Got you. So everyone's described personal boundaries, right? What emotions arise when your personal boundaries are breached? You can put those in the chat. You can raise your hand and talk to us about it. So you all thought about or described a personal boundary. What happens? What emotions arise when your personal boundaries are breached? Kathy?
Good morning, everyone. For me, when my personal boundary, and I just had this situation not too long ago at work, and when my personal boundary, when I felt it was breached, I became very aggressive, very defensive. I felt the need to take a stand, and but I overreacted. So I had to step back after that and really take a look at what really was going on with me, and take responsibility for my part. And what I found out was I overreacted in many ways, but I also owed an apology to the group because I reacted and responded very aggressively in a group setting that everyone there felt uncomfortable because of the way I reacted. So, I have to take.
Kathy, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Help us out a little bit. What was the example of how your boundary got breached?
What happened was somebody challenged me on something. We were giving some feedback on an exercise that we had done with via strength, and they were giving feedback, and I felt what the individual was sharing and saying to me was a direct personal attack.
Okay.
And so what I did was I internalized it. And as a result, I overreacted, and I became very aggressive, verbally accosted this individual. And I had to step back and really take a look at myself and take full responsibility for my part. And I felt that I needed to apologize to the group for my behavior, because I involved everybody and it made everyone else feel uncomfortable.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your sharing that very much. Thank you, Kathy. Anybody else?
Thank you.
What do you feel when your personal boundaries are breached or violated? See a lot of examples in the chat as well. Sparkle, how are you?
Good to see you.
Mhm.
Good morning, you guys. Yes, I remember having that harsh reality that I didn't have the greatest boundaries as I started getting through my addiction and realizing that I would jump up and do anything for anyone, and then realize at the end of the day, everything I had planned, I didn't do. And so, form of my boundaries, I had to really take a step back and look and say, okay, am I doing this to myself? You know, and I started to realize that I, am, instead of dismissing things, if I have a plan for me to do for that day, I need to stick to that plan. So it was a consistent practice for me to practice boundaries and realize how to manage it and be able to say no, period. It's a complete sentence, right? And so for me, it was more like, once I got the hang of being able to stop in the moment and pause and ask myself, how does this affect me? Am I doing this because they want it, but is it going to oversee what I'm doing? I really started learning the power of boundaries and being able to set those boundaries ahead of time and watch people listen to it as long as you're listening to it. So definitely boundaries are the whole thing,
Thank you. Georgia.
I was just thinking about this, and I was thinking, how can I relate it to something? And I did have a client recently in a group meeting who totally crossed a boundary, and I was so frustrated and angry, but I didn't want to, like, obviously deal with it in a group dynamic. It wouldn't have been the right situation. But actually, I waited, and at that time was really helpful because it made me reflect on what. Yes, I'm angry she broke my boundaries, but what else is there? It's like that I'm picking of, well, what else? Why is it? And it was the frustration and anger at myself that I allowed her to come into the group setting when she'd kind of already said to me that she wanted a topic. And I said to her, think about whether that's a recovery topic or that's best served somewhere else. And then she came into the group and then just threw the topic and she started telling people how to fix her stuff. So that was really hard because I can understand she wanted to talk about it, but there was the boundary that I'd already said, I'm going to come back to, give me a couple of days. So it was frustration on my part that I'd not taken it further with her, or said to her, maybe don't come to this meeting, come to the next meeting.
I think when you're talking about boundaries as protection, right? There's 4 quadrants to healing for that, that White Bison taught me many years ago. And I've really worked on the 4 quadrants, right? Of there's physical boundaries, right? That you want to keep yourself safe. There's mental boundaries, and some of you are talking about that, and those tie in closely to the emotional boundaries as well, that you're there. We set up things to protect ourselves from being hurt emotionally, right? And then there's also spiritual boundaries, and that might be a different topic. But the next question is, what would happen And Sparkle was talking a little bit about this, but today, what would happen if you had no boundaries? What would happen? Anne Marie?
Hi, I actually have an example. I think married 45 years, and it's only about probably 20 years ago that it dawned on me that my spouse had a habit of responding angrily many times. It was just like a general emotion of his. And I never really said anything about it. I just managed it. And then it did come to my healthy self at one time to say to him, you know, it's not even fair for me to be angry back at you about the way you're speaking to me, because I've never told you how much it upsets me that you speak to me that way. But moving forward, I am going to let you know when it bothers me, and I will be saying something to help you understand that that's not how that I'm feeling like you're responding angrily, and I don't like that tone. And you know, he balked about it, and maybe even denied having that. But I said, but just to be clear, that's what I will be doing moving forward. And so as we moved forward in our relationship and I felt that he was angry, I would say, this is an example. I just want you to know, I don't want you to talk to me like that. And it was hard. I think change, when we go to change something, it invites change in someone else if it's a relationship. And they may balk at that. So for us to continue, it takes courage, I think, and it takes an understanding of yourself and a kindness and a curiousness and a playfulness with the situation. And moving forward, we have, yes, I would say married 40 years, known each other 45 years, and we're still working on communication and conversations and boundaries. But I was proud of us, and in that sense, which I did not have a boundary, and I think that's an example, but
Yeah, I
thanks
like it.
again.
Thank you.
And I also agree that you look smashing today. I'm sorry I didn't say that before. Is that a Peter Max design shirt?
Sort of. It's sort of a hip, yeah, sort of.
All right, it looks great.
Sparkle.
So most of the elements I found, okay, so I'm a month from 5 years. If I
Yeah.
wouldn't have boundaries, I wouldn't be here.
Okay.
I would say boundaries for me, working in the corporate world, I was considered a doormat and a yes man for a long time. And the reason why
So if you don't have boundaries, you become a doormat and a yes person. And okay, gotcha.
There it is.
That's a bit very clear. Khalees, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, I feel like me personally, I don't really create firm boundaries until something's being activated in me. Like the emotional, whenever there's an emotional pain, for example, that gets to the point that I'm like, I can't take this anymore. Maybe some boundaries need to be put in place. But I cannot have these walls built for the same for every individual, because people are not all the same. People are all going to act differently and flow differently. So I feel like boundaries develop as I develop, as our relationship develops or something. But why would I create walls if I'm just starting a conversation with somebody? We ain't even like doing anything. We're just talking.
Gotcha. Thank you, Gina.
I call mine a cutoff. There's only so far I'm going to go, because those protective factors I have to put in to keep myself together. So whatever you don't change, you choose. If you don't have a cutoff for me, it'll open me up to more what we call emotional injury and also mental stress. So my cutoff is so far, and after that, it just turns on.
Okay.
I don't know if I just developed that over the years of managing, but if I don't get deposits after a while, I just turn off.
Gotcha. Thank you. Kevin, what happens if we have no boundaries?
this is a 2-for-1. Thank you. On the 2-for-1 is my boundaries were set with the fence story. I'm jumping back to a fence story right quick. It was a prison fence. Prison fence was a boundary, and it maintained some type of control over my life and gave me a lot of discipline. Once I got out into the free world, I had to learn to build boundaries around myself, because if I didn't put that fence back up, or that imaginary fence back up in my life, I would be out of control. I mean, I would cross all kinds of limitations and borderlines that I'm not supposed to be crossing. So boundaries, if I don't have the rules, if I don't know the rules to the situation that I'm living in my job or whatever it may be, things get totally out of control, even in relationships. So I know the rules. So it's just chaos if I don't have those rules or boundaries in place.
Thank you. LC.
So, when I don't have boundaries, I break down, I feel discontented, and I'm not effective in a relationship with myself or with anybody else when I don't have boundaries. And for me, boundaries are really like a chain link fence. They kind of like can stretch and move. They're not like a stockade, but if I don't have that chain link fence in my life, like, again, I'm not effective, and it brings me unhappiness.
I like what you said about chain link. My AA sponsor always talked about boundaries. Are they concrete or rubber bands? I never thought about it that way before, but anyway, Robin, let's see if we can hear you now.
Yeah, I've been struggling here, guys, but this has been a great discussion, and I have put some things in the chat, but I don't see them. I don't know what's going on with my.
I see them. Thank you. I got them.
Did you see them?
Yep.
Oh, okay. But I want to talk about advocating for my boundaries. When I have boundaries, and because you are a new person, or I'm speaking to someone who don't know what they are, I don't be offended by you. I just say, that's not something I do, or I'm not going to do that. And there was a young lady on there who said, no. No is my favorite word. When I am not going to change my mind about it, no is a complete sentence. I don't need to explain it. I don't have to address it. I just say no, nice, politely, no. I might say no, thank you, but that's about the best you're going to get with that one. And so those are boundaries that I don't waver on whatsoever. But until it comes up, it's not a boundary. I don't come in like, oh, hell no, I'm going to set this fence up because Phil is here and I know who Phil is. I give everybody a new slate, like I get a new slate every day. Every slate is a new day. I'm not going to come in with Phil did that yesterday, so I know you're going to do it again today.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. Michelle.
Hey, you guys heard me, yay.
So I love what Robin said. You know, my mantra is no is a complete sentence. And I learned that because I had no boundaries my entire life until I got into recovery. And it was many years after I was into recovery that I learned how to use the word no. And the first time I did it with my mom, who was the one that I always said, yes, mom, yes, mom, yes, mom, it built up all these resentments to her because I just, you know, like, you're expecting too much of me. But I was the one who was saying, yeah, we're okay. Yes, whatever you need, mom. And the first time I said no to her, I felt such freedom. And it got easier and easier emotionally not to feel guilty about saying no to my mother. And I loved what I think it was Anne Marie said as well, that I just took everything I learned with my mother and I moved it over to my husband. And and I did, because they are like the male and female of the same person. I thought you married your father, but I married my mother. And I love my husband to death, but I had to do what Anne Marie said too. Listen, you know, are you mad at me? Well, no, I'm not really mad at you, but I don't like the way you're talking to me. And the look on his face was like, what? And I said, you can't talk to me like that anymore. And he said to me, you can't play with your mother anymore. And so, but it's gotten better because I just keep practicing it.
Right.
Cool. You know, no.
Gotcha. Barry.
Yeah, I think it's really impossible to even live without boundaries. I think even in doing my addiction, I had certain boundaries, what I had to learn is to have healthy boundaries, and those was the ones that I had to come up with what was healthy boundaries for me. But I think I've always had boundaries. I mean, at one point in time, my boundaries were very unhealthy. I kept myself in an unhealthy environment, and I wouldn't be in another environment that probably was healthy for me. And now I've kind of flipped it. I stay in healthy. I develop healthy boundaries now, so I'll be around people and circumstances that are healthy for me.
Gotcha. So let's get into this is incredible, but let's get into the real meat of this. What do boundaries have to do with recovery coaching? They see yourself as a recovery coach. How do boundaries play a role? Robin.
Boundaries have everything to do with recovery coaching. And I mean everything. Depending on who your participant is and what the skill sets that they have and you have and what you're trying to do for them, it will change. You had mentioned to the one guy, he said he doesn't loan money. That's a boundary. But there may come a time, depending on the circumstances, where this is a need that would have to change for that individual. So it goes on what is of this situation that happens. Just like I said, I'm a concrete no for some things. There's a concrete no. And I won't waver on that. However, I might tell them, Phil will do it. Ask Phil. I'm not going to do it. But it has everything to do because it's a setup if we're trying to help people and we want to teach people how to make choices for themselves. And by us sticking with our boundaries and saying what we mean and meaning what we say, encourage them and empower them to be better advocates and decision makers for themselves.
Okay.
Their things don't have to be ours. They could be their own, but we're teaching them this by role modeling. And so that's why boundaries, I think, are very effective and impactful.
Yeah. And I like what you said about they get established as the relationship develops. I think Khalees talked about that a little bit too. But again, Robin, you're talking a lot about boundaries in a generic sense. So what is like a concrete, what is a boundary you have, say, at a first session with a recovery? Do you have any?
Sure. Like one is not telling them everything about me because I need to learn about them so I can help them.
Gotcha.
The boundary is I'm here to help you.
So is that a boundary or a technique?
It's more of a technique for me. It's more of a technique for me, but that's something when I meet someone that I'm trying to help them, I need to know where they are, what they see that would be practical for them for us to move forward. And then if I can help them say, well, maybe can you see it, but I got to meet them where they are in order for me to be able to graft a new idea on them.
All right. Thank you. Brandy.
I think that boundaries are protection for us as recovery coaches. It protects ourselves, the organizations we work for. It protects all of us. It helps us not to get into sticky situations. If it wasn't for boundaries and having folks and mentors walk me through certain situations, I would have put myself in worse situations, which would have made it harder for my household and also for the person that I am coaching and the organization I'm working for.
Brandy,
so I see it as a protection.
Brandy,
yes.
Give me an example of one of those boundaries that was in place that protected you.
Well, I have grandchildren. My youngest daughter is 25. And so one of the teams that I was supervising was at Weather Amnesty, or a homeless place for persons to go if they don't have anywhere to sleep at night. And there was a young girl there that was 18. And myself and another coach, a couple other coaches, we were all talking. We're like, oh my goodness, what is she here for? Like, where's her family? Like, she's still a child. I have a child that's 18. Like, I just want to take her home, right? It's dangerous out there, but we continued to talk. And I was like, no, I'm going to stick to my boundaries. I don't know what's going on, right? It's a safety. And thank goodness that I did do that, because later her family did get in touch with us because they were looking for her. So we were able to reconnect her. But she had been put out of the home for assaulting her grandmother.
Yeah,
And
well,
so
so
there were
that's
things I didn't even know. Yeah. And I
so
could
that's a great example. Like a boundary is I'm not going to let recoveries stay at my house.
Mhm.
That's a
Absolutely.
very okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Kai.
This is me grasping at straws, but I think about MI practices and how we don't want to be leading too much or following too much, and finding the balance in that in our relationships with our recoveries. And so I think there's an exploration of like, oh, am I coming to the rescue too much, or like, am I wanting to solve and fix too much? And perhaps I'm looking for the boundary around that. But I think about I think one thing that I'm hearing a lot from the group, but one thing I feel like I'm missing in the conversation is enforcement of boundaries. I think so as a personal example,
That'll be a question coming up. So you're
okay,
right on pace.
okay. All right. I'll save my anecdote for that.
All right, cool. Wanda.
Okay, so in our agency, we have specific policies that we need to let our recoveries know about. And in that process, we had a person that was training to be a recovery coach violate one of those policies. So then the conversation had to be why that was a violation. So like the policy is that we don't participate in any illegal activity. This recovery allowed an individual in one of the houses to drive their motorcycle without a license. So they participated, the recovery coach participated with the recovery in an illegal activity. And so we had to have a firm conversation with them about that.
Okay, thank you. Tina.
One particular thing I think I wanted to bring out is staying safely in my lane when it comes to a boundary. When I'm in my lane, I have no traffic, but sometimes people cross over into your lane and you still have to protect them as well. So I just think that being safe in your lane is a boundary for me. Thank you.
And then I don't want you to answer this question, but you used the term, and I want everybody to think about it, is what does safe mean to you? Because that's different for everybody, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Kurt.
Did you want me to tell you?
No, I just want you to think about it. There's no answer. It's
dealing with my own stuff and doing what I have to do to make the recovery the expert.
Right. Kurt.
I support people in recovery from porn and BDSM related kinks, addiction to this. So this is a highly taboo topic, and that has two effects on me as a coach. One is I am at least initially semi-anonymous myself. It also means that because of the taboo factor, people are very guarded in opening up.
Okay.
And that does require me to share some things about myself, about my lived experience. Otherwise, we're not getting anywhere. But the boundary there is I don't give names or highly specific situations.
Gotcha. Thank you. LC.
So a situation that comes up often for me is that I meet them and they're going to treatment, and it's usually from the family. So I make the family know that I'm more than happy to talk to them for the few weeks that the recovery is in treatment. But my boundary is
that once that recovery comes out, that I am only going to talk to that person. And it causes a lot of pushback because the family still wants me to talk to them and to report to them about the recovery. But the boundary for me is that I've transferred to the care of the recovery. And if you want information about what's going on, you have to talk to your loved one. Like, I'm not that connective tissue anymore. And that comes up for me like all the time.
Elsie, is that a personal boundary or an organizational boundary?
I mean, it's an organizational boundary too.
Gotcha. Which leads me into, I want to try to draw a picture for you. And this came from doing this conversation in recovery community centers in Connecticut. Let's say we're setting up shop, right? Do you remember, like in the old Peanuts, that Lucy would give out psychological advice for 5 cents? You remember? Whatever, at the table. So let's say you're in a yard, right? And you have your chair and a chair for recovery. Okay, you're in a yard outside a house. Does your yard have a fence? If it has a fence, the fence probably has a gate, right? And who do you let through the gate? Now let's say that you want to go up on the porch, a different level, and there's another gate, let's say to the porch, and you want to go get out of the rain, and you want to sit in there. Or you want to go inside to the living room or the parlor where it's even more comfortable and get some lemonade or iced tea and sit down and have a conversation there. So this is where you will have your own personal space for those who are your own personal, like, recovery coaches, right? You have your own house, to say, to invite people in. You might not ever invite people into the yard. You might go somewhere else and meet them in a coffee shop, right? If you work for an organization, you also have the boundaries. So you might go into an organization. What if you're doing recovery coaches in the prison? And we have recovery coaches in the prison. They have fences and razor wire on top and locked steel bars and concrete walls and all of that. So there's some serious boundaries. So these are physical boundaries, but this also translates to your emotional boundaries as well. Because I would see myself, and I'm like looking out on my lawn, right? If I was going to open a shop, my lawn would have no fence outside. You know, I'd sit in the yard and say, anybody want recovery coaching? Come on in. You know, come on in that. And then I would see what they were like. And before I would say, you want to come up and sit on the deck. And then I would go some more places and say, before I invited them into the house. But I would try to keep the initial with as few boundaries as possible, at least on my end, until they're established. In a lot of organizations, when we go to work somewhere, they've already put up those boundaries for us. And we have to figure out how to work within those, even though we might not agree with some of the policies that have been put in place. Any thoughts on what I just shared? Please. Like the analogy, hate the analogy? Michael.
I think it's a great analogy. I think it invites trust, right? When people feel like you trust them, it gives a little leeway for them to trust you, right? And I think it's a great analogy. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, I like this analogy too. I mean, it is like, in some ways for me, it's like a spider web in a good sense, because right here in the center, is the recovery coach. And in the center of the recovery coach is the center of the recovery coach and the center of the human being. And we can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And it is, but it's about these connections. And like Michael just said, I think it's about building that trust And so it's like with any relationship, right? Everything's kind of on the surface level at first, and then you get a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer, until maybe we eventually let somebody reach that soft, gooey center, or do we? And that's our choice, I believe. And that's the boundary. When we have these internal boundaries and these external boundaries, can be about self-efficacy and self-regulation as well. But who I let in is who I let in. And I think that when we are talking about this in terms of being a recovery coach, being open as we can be, is going to allow people an immediate, hopefully, feeling of welcoming and warmth, and help to establish those really pivotal moments of the coaching relationship.
Right. And I love what you said about welcoming, because think about a recovery having to go through a lot of like navigating a property, walking the fence line till they find a gate or an opening, and then there might be a gatekeeper just to come in to see the recovery coach. And is that, that could be organizational, but we might also be doing that unwittingly in other ways, like on a personal level too. Kai.
Yeah, I think you just touched on what I was going to share. Like, what if my house, was set up with, I'm standing on the porch saying, "Hey, do you wanna be coached?" And I've got a fence with barbed wire. Maybe there's, the fence is on fire. There's some dogs circling around that are,
Right.
chain link fence. What am I inviting people into, and how am I presenting and being welcome? If I'm setting up this sort of like, if I'm setting up barrier over barrier over barrier, I have to be careful with like the boundaries that I'm choosing. Am I doing this, for some sort of self-gratification, or am I doing this for protection of like the relationship that I have with the recovery? So yeah, that house analogy works really well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Khalees.
I mean, I kind of was thinking about whenever you're talking about all the walls and stuff, I'm like, geez, it's a freaking maze. Like, I'm never going to get to the coach, Jesus. And I think too, there's that element of like, we need to remember this is a human role as well. I hear all the time, people are like, oh yeah, I coach. Oh, but first, let me send you this contract over, and then let me do all of this stuff before and it's like, I don't even know if I like you. I don't even know if I want to have a conversation with you going forward. Can we and so if we just open it up, I mean, that feels safe to me. I'll tell you, and I'm putting myself in like the role of like being a recovery, whenever there's all these barriers against the wall, even before I've opened the door, I'm gone. I'm not even going up to the door. You're not even getting me in the yard, because I could see it. And so why would I even want to approach to ask for help? And our goal is to, even if we can get them in the door, that's beautiful.
I'm fascinated too by some of the people talked about their personal recovery of having to put in boundaries. Otherwise they wouldn't be put up boundaries or have boundaries in place. Otherwise they wouldn't be in recovery. Mine was the exact opposite. So it just goes to the diversity of recovery experience, right? I use Pink Floyd, the wall analogy all the time, right? That, mama put another brick in the wall. I just kept putting bricks in the wall until I was literally shut off from the sunlight of the spirit. My whole process of recovery over the last 36, 37 years has to be to tear down the wall, which I perceived as a barrier or a boundary or a fence of self-protection, when it was the exact opposite. It was suffocating me. So every time I'm trying to just pull out take down walls and let people in my personal life, in my leadership role, and as a recovery coach, and not push people away. Because some of the boundaries for me are like invisible force fields. It's my anger, it could be my sarcasm, it could be whatever, to keep people away. Right. So to me, it was the healthier way for me was just to to try to eliminate barriers. And as an organizational leader, I will never create a policy that prevents us from doing the right thing. And some of you have already talked about policies in place at the organization that might be preventing you from doing the right thing. Any thoughts on that? Okay. How do you enforce your boundaries? What are some techniques that you have? Yeah, Kai.
Yeah, I will start with a bad example.
Okay.
So I had a boundary with my mother as when I was in early recovery. We were staying in the same home, and I wanted my space to be my own so I could navigate and recover, and she would infringe on the space. And so I said, "Hey, I'm setting up a boundary. I do not, I need my privacy so I can, talk with my recovery friends and have this space as my own." And she said, "Okay." And then she would do it again. And so, I was talking with my coach at the time, and I said, this keeps happening. I've set up the boundary. And so, and to me, that was good enough, this is on her now. And so what my coach sort of talked me through was like, once a boundary has been established, there has to be an impact or a consequence of when the boundaries are not being respected. And so, what had to be discussed was, when can we have this conversation saying like, hey, this isn't being respected. Therefore, if it happens again, then, I'm going to have to get a lock for my door, or I'm going to have to do these things. And so that elicited a lot of fear because, I grew up as a people pleaser. So when I'm having somebody, can repeatedly crossing the boundary, I was like, oh, well, I don't want to be an inconvenience, or I don't want to be a burden on them. And so what I've learned is that I was teaching them how to treat me. And so once I had to come up with an actual game plan of like, here's a list of things that are going to happen if the boundary's not respected. And to be communicating that with my parents, and also, with the people that are with me. And so I would say communication is key, and then actually coming up with the idea of like what that boundary looks like when it's crossed. And that
Gotcha.
may not happen beforehand, but it may happen afterwards.
Gotcha. Thank you. Robin. You're on mute still.
Okay. Tell me the question again. I got a senior moment.
How do you enforce your boundaries?
Oh, how I enforce my boundary is by doing them and not, well, let me give you an example. This morning, I have this beautiful young lady in my life. She's 25 years old, should be in recovery according to me, but she's not. And I am a lifeline for her. It's close, personal. She called me auntie, but there's a lot of barriers, a lot of things going on with her. And it's hard for me to get her to hear herself or see herself. So what I do is I made up my mind. She can get a half an hour of my time maximum to vent, do whatever she needs to do, because I know she needs somebody. And I'm going to be that person for her. But like 20 minutes out, I start winding her down. I try to say, refocus her on what she's saying and everything. By this time, she's probably up in the air like this, hooping and hollering. And I stay calm. I stay calm. I said, okay, now, I'm getting off this phone. I'm about to wind it down. So is there anything else you need to tell me? Or can you hear me tell you something? Either way, because we're going to close out. And she says, well, auntie, I don't think you heard. I said, I heard everything you said. I said, it may not be, I'm not probably responding to you the way you would want me to, but I'm giving you my best. And the time is almost up.
Right.
At 8:30, I said, baby, I love you. I want you to have a wonderful, blessed rest of your day. I'm here for you. I'll talk to you another time. And I hung up my phone.
Good. That's a great example. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Barry.
And yeah, I really like what you said about taking, the walls down. I had to do the same thing. But I think that I enforce my boundaries as needed, right? I think in order to be, especially as a recovery coach, to be effective, I have to be open-minded and I have to be somewhat flexible,
Yeah.
and so I think I'll enforce them as needed. I think, when it comes to safety, my message has to be consistent, but I have to be open to the situation or to the person or to where the person's at. A lot of times, I can put a boundary in place that can enable me to be effective as a recovery coach.
Right.
And I don't want to do that. So I have to always, because boundaries are going to be crossed because nobody knows your boundaries, but you.
Yeah.
So I can't expect, I don't even get mad when somebody crosses mine. I just identify that, I'm not going to do that or
Right.
this is not going to work. But I don't have stuff set in stone because I don't know the other person, where they're coming from. So if I'm going to meet them where they're at, I have to be flexible with my boundaries. And
Barry, Barry,
go ahead.
I'm gonna be a recovery of yours, all right?
Mhm.
And I'm gonna cross your boundary and I want you to tell me, just show me how you're not gonna do this. Barry, dude, my rent's due tomorrow. I need like $300 for you to help me pay the rent. Will you give me $300, please?
Well, first of all, the simple way is I don't have $300. And that's a nice way of not crossing my boundaries. I don't have it. And
Yeah.
that's the end of the story. I don't have to tell you that I don't give people money. I don't have to say that. You know what I mean? I just say I don't have it.
All right.
I don't know. Maybe we can look for somewhere else for you to get it. If
Yeah.
you need help, and leave it at that.
Well, it's like you can be kind and firm at the same time,
Correct.
which is your nature. So I appreciate that.
Right.
Kurt.
I think Phil might return in a week asking if you now have $300.
Yeah, exactly. You got $300 now?
Yeah. Again, Kyle said some things, or Kai said some things that I related to strongly with regards to setting boundaries. At 30, I was, due to my addiction, I was forced to return to living with my parents. But we agreed that I would do my own laundry. I have an extremely forcefully caring mother who managed to find all kinds of excuses to still do my laundry. Also, like Barry said, as needed. So I started small, just saying, please don't do this. We agreed on this. Then in a more strict tone. But over time, each time I had to kind of amp up the consequences. And sometimes when I give this example to people without context, they say I'm just a sadist. But so at one point, she washed a shirt of mine, and I got home and I saw it, and I asked her about it, and she admitted, and she had a good excuse again. So I said, well, I already told you what's going to happen. I just arrived home. I put the shirt on the floor, and I stepped on it to make it dirty, and I threw it back into the laundry. That was the level I had to reach, and then it never happened again. That was the level I had to go to establish that boundary.
That's interesting. Anybody else? What are you taking away from today's session? I'd love to hear some kind of like general wrap-up comments, questions, feedback. Anybody, please. This is where someone that might not have learned how this works is that you take your mouse or your touchpad and you scroll down to the bottom, and there's this little thing that says reactions, and you raise your hand there, and then you go up to the top of the queue and I'll call on somebody. So like Ed just demonstrated. Thank you, Ed.
You're welcome, Phil. And thank you. I love this whole discussion this morning. And the only thing, not the only thing, but one of the things that keep going through my mind with all of the discussion is Robert Frost's poem, The Mending Wall. And it's these two neighbors that every year meet, and they walk their wall of rocks and they repair the wall. And often the meaning of the poem is open to debate. The question is the wall healthy for the two neighbors, or is it blocking the two neighbors? Thus, the question is, good walls make good neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
The question that I keep getting from all of this is, my recovery is successful first and foremost because of the connections I have been able to make back into my life. So everything about boundaries for me is important because not only does it keep things out of my life, but it also keeps things from coming into my life. And I always want to make sure that I'm not being closed to the opportunities that can come into my life. So I always sitting on the fence of how important my boundaries are. Am I limiting myself, which is important to do and for my own safety, for all the reasons we discussed. But I also want to make sure that I am not too closed, that I don't have this maze built around me, that I am not allowing things to come into my life that I need to make those connections with for a richer, more beautiful life. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Anybody else? Don't be shy. Cleese, what are you thinking about? And then I'll get to you, Alfred.
I mean, I'm thinking I need to set some boundaries,
Okay.
if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Couldn't ask for more from a session. Alfred.
Hey Phil, hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay. So I think like I could relate to a lot that what was said, and I remember being, like first of times I was very isolated and it was unhealthy. I had a ton of walls up, a ton of barriers up, and I didn't let anyone in. But then when in my crazy stage, and it was a bunch of chaos. I was all over the place, and I welcomed everything, and I was very outgoing. But to get back to a healthy space, I had to then recreate some boundaries and set some different barriers, so to say, and kind of isolate again in a sense. So that they're both, it's kind of a two-way thing. The boundaries are kind of like early on how we discussed about saying to keep some things out.
Yeah.
But also you want to the analogy with the home and the gate and the fence, you're able to then allow certain things in, I guess with some some subjectiveness,
Yeah, sure. So oftentimes we talk about, boundaries that's throwing a lot around, like you got to set some boundaries, and even Cleese just said it too. I feel like I have to set some boundaries in my life. I think like if you're setting up house and your life is a house, that for me, I want my boundaries to be, when I'm in my house, I want it to be pretty secure, right? But my yard and stuff, I don't necessarily know that maybe the sidewalk is an invisible boundary. I don't know that I want gates for people to come see me and all of that. But how we work with boundaries in your role as a recovery coach is not a science. It's artistic. It's how you want to establish that and what's most effective for you as a person and your growth, and what's most effective in your practice as recovery coaching, and what types of boundaries does the person you're working with need to experience or see. And that's all art. I don't know that you can teach that. You figure that out. I've often talked about Jolie, who's our director of administration and HR, she is a masterful at being firm and kind at the same time. That you can say no gently. It doesn't have to be this big traumatic event to just say no. You know, especially when people are always sometimes people expect to hear a no. They're just pushing you to the point where you say no. So keep all that in mind. Again, it's our time is up. I thoroughly appreciate the conversation, and thank you so much for your participation. It was really rich, and I'm super appreciative. Create a great day, as Maggie would say.
Yeah.